The morning sun cast long, blade-like shadows across the sterile white floors of the renewal center place, where the unwanted were catalogued, evaluated, and sold with the same indifference reserved for surplus machinery. The air smelled of disinfectant and recycled breath. Lights hummed softly overhead. Everything here was meant to be clean, efficient, and forgettable. In Pod 7, 3 women sat on identical metal benches bolted to the ground. Their posture said exhaustion. Their silence said resignation. Their skin was green Zerithian green, the kind that drew admiring glances and greedy calculations across half the galaxy. Zerithians were prized for their strength, their long lives, and most of all their extraordinary fertility. They were treated like blessings when they produced, like investments when they didn't. These 3 were different. Kessa stared down at the barcode tattooed on the inside of her wrist. The black lines were crisp and new, burned into her skin only days ago. A red stripe slashed through it like a wound. Red meant effective. Red meant sterile. Red meant worthless. Beside her, Mira sat with her chin lifted as if pride could keep her from breaking. Her fingers laced so tightly together her knuckles had gone pale beneath the green. On Kessa's other side, Fane's shoulders trembled faintly. She had cried until there were no tears left, and now her grief leaked out in silent shudders. They were sisters. Not by blood. Zerithians didn't use the word the same way humans did, but by bond, by shared childhood, by the long years of being measured and graded and judged for what their bodies could do. They had been raised in the same communal towers, trained in the same academies, promised the same bright future reserved for premium stock. A week ago, they'd lived in the Renewal Center's premium wing, where the floors were warm beneath your feet and attendants spoke in rehearsed kindness. A week ago, their wrists had been clean. Then the final test results returned, confirmed sterility. The administrators had stopped calling them ladies and started calling them units. Their rooms had been reassigned within hours. The premium wing had bright windows and simulated gardens. The unusables corridor smelled like rust and cold water. Here, the lights didn't mimic daylight. They didn't bother with comfort. No one invested in things they planned to discard. Kessa had tried to speak at first, had demanded a retest, had insisted something must be wrong, had fought the terror rising in her throat. Mira had argued with the physician until security stepped into the room. Fane had simply gone quiet, folding into herself like a flower closing at night. Days passed. Their voices faded. There was nothing left to negotiate. A crackle came through the speaker mounted high on the wall, sharp enough to slice through the pod's silence. Lot for 7C. Kessa's stomach clenched. 3 Zerithian females, ages 22 to 26. Sterility confirmed. Opening bid. 500 credits for all 3. 500. Kessa's jaw tightened until it hurt. A week ago, a single fertile Zerithian woman could have sold for 50,000 credits. Sometimes more if she had good genetic markers. Now the 3 of them together were worth less than a used transport pod or a broken service drone. Through the observation window, Kessa could see into the auction room. There were only a handful of bidders scattered across the seats. Most of them didn't even look up. They sat with tablets in their laps. scrolling through projected lists and waiting for lots that would impress their friends or expand their business interests. One bidder lifted their head briefly, eyes flicking over the pod's glass, as if the women behind it were a display of antique furniture. Then they looked back down. 500, someone said, voice flat. 525, another bidder added, sounding almost irritated. The auctioneer's tone remained mechanical, the way it always did here. There was no drama, no charm, no attempt to make people feel anything. Auctions were for numbers, not stories. Kessa felt Mira's hand slip into hers. It was a small gesture, almost childish, but it held the weight of everything they'd lost. On her other side, Fane pressed her forehead to her knees, fighting a new wave of tears. Going once at 525, the auctioneer droned. Kessa's chest tightened. This was it. If they sold low, they'd be sent to wherever low-value purchases went. Labor colonies, private facilities, factories that wanted strong hands and didn't care what those hands belonged to. The renewal center didn't keep steriles. Steriles took up space. Space was money. Go in twice. Kessa's fingers curled around Mira's. She could hear her own blood in her ears. Then a new voice cut in, quiet but steady, carrying across the room with surprising clarity. 600. Kessa jerked her head up. Her eyes searched the sparse crowd until they landed on the speaker. A man stood at the back of the auction room, as if he hadn't wanted to take up a seat meant for people with more credits than shame. He was human, maybe mid-30s. His clothes were worn, clean but old, the kind of fabric that had been mended more than once. His shoulders were slightly rounded, like someone who carried invisible weight. Dark hair fell into his eyes. His face had the drawn look of exhaustion that came from too many nights without sleep. He held his tablet awkwardly, like he didn't belong here. Kessa's first thought was suspicion. Humans didn't buy Zerithians like this unless they wanted something. Humans with tired eyes and thin credit accounts didn't buy anyone at all, unless desperation drove them. 600, the auctioneer repeated, sounding almost startled. Go in once. Go in twice. Silence. No one challenged the bid. No one cared enough. Sold, the auctioneer declared. Bidder 23. 600 credits. The pod door hissed open, and an attendant stepped in with a clipboard. Not meeting their eyes, their wrists were scanned. New ownership codes burned into the ink of their barcodes. When the attendant left, another worker appeared to escort them toward transport. As they walked down the corridor, Kessa kept expecting someone to stop them, to tell them there'd been a mistake, that sterility had been misread, that they were being returned to premium, that their lives weren't about to be rewritten by a stranger's impulse purchase. But no one stopped them. Outside, a weathered hover then waited by the curb. Its paint was faded, one of its side panels dented. It wasn't the sleek black transports used by wealthy buyers. It looked like it had been patched together over years of necessity. The man stood by the door, rubbing his hands together as if cold had settled into his bones. When he saw them, he seemed to hesitate, then offered a tentative nod. I'm Marcus, he said. His voice wasn't cruel. It wasn't smug. It sounded careful, like he knew he was holding something fragile and wasn't sure how to touch it. They climbed into the back, guided more by habit than choice. The van lifted off with a faint whine, gliding away from the renewal center's towering white walls. The city beyond was all glass spires and neon-ribboned roads New Seattle, shining and bright and indifferent. But Marcus steered them away from the center, toward the outskirts where the towers thinned and the streets grew narrower. The farther they went, the quieter the world became. Kessa watched the view through the window, trying to read the future in the changing landscape. Mira sat rigid, as if her spine had turned to metal. Fane leaned against the wall, eyes shut, lips moving silently prayers, perhaps, or the recitation of something that once made sense. Marcus drove without speaking. Occasionally he glanced at them in the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable. Not hungry, not pleased, just tired. When the van finally descended, it settled onto a cracked driveway in front of a small house. It was modest, slightly rundown, the kind of place that looked like it had been loved once, and then neglected by time and exhaustion. The yard was overgrown. A fence leaned at an angle as if it had given up. The front step creaked even before anyone stood on it. This was not where Zerithians usually ended up. Fertile Zerithians lived behind security gates and manicured gardens, their owners eager to display their investments. This house looked like survival. Marcus turned off the engine and sat for a moment as if gathering courage. Then he faced them. "I know you're probably wondering what I want from you," he said quietly. Kessa didn't answer. Her throat felt too tight. "The truth is," Marcus continued, "I need help. But maybe you need something, too." He stepped out, walked around, and opened the side door for them himself. Not a handler, not an attendant, just him. "Come inside," he said. "Please." The house smelled like soap, old fabric, and something faintly sweet cinnamon, maybe, or baked apples. It was cluttered, but clean in the way busy homes were clean. Not perfect, but cared for. Children's toys littered the living room floor. A stack of picture books sat crookedly beside a couch with worn cushions. The refrigerator was covered in drawing stick figure families, spaceships, a rainbow with a lopsided sun. Photos lined the hallway, many of them featuring Marcus and a woman with dark hair and bright eyes. Her smile wide enough to make the camera seem warmer. A voice called from upstairs. "Dad? Coming, Em." Marcus called back automatically, then turned to the three sisters. "My wife," he said, and his voice faltered just slightly. "Sarah. She died 8 months ago. Cancer." Mira's posture softened just a fraction. Grief recognized grief. "I have 2 kids," Marcus went on. "Emma is 7. Jacob is 5. I work double shifts at the manufacturing plant. I'm trying to keep us afloat." But he exhaled. A sound like surrender. "It's not enough. I'm not there when they wake up. I'm not there when they go to sleep. They need," his jaw tightened, "they need someone." Kessa's mind clicked through possibilities. Labor, service, domestic work. The kind of work that didn't leave bruises, but could still grind a soul into dust. "You bought us to be nannies," she said, the words sharp with bitterness. Marcus met her eyes. He didn't flinch. "I bought you to be free," he said. The room went very still. Kessa blinked, sure she'd misheard. Marcus continued, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a thin data pad. He held it out, not as a threat, but as proof. The contract I signed gives you room and board, he said, and a small salary. It's not much, but it's mine, and you'll have it. And he swallowed. After 1 year, I file for your emancipation. You'll be free citizens, not property. You can leave, or stay, or do whatever you want. I just need help for 1 year. Mira stepped forward, eyes narrowed. Why us? Marcus's expression hardened not with anger toward them, but with anger towards something larger. Because the system that calls you defective is broken, he said. Because you deserve better than being thrown away. His voice cracked on the last words, and he looked down for a moment, as if ashamed of feeling so much. Then he looked back up, and because I know what it's like to feel worthless, the hallway photos seemed to watch them. After Sarah died, Marcus said, people looked at me like I was already failing. Like grief made me incompetent. They told me I couldn't handle it. That I should give the kids up, start over. Like my children were baggage I could drop. His hands curled into fists, then relaxed. But they're not a burden. They're my whole world. He looked at Kessa, then Mira, then Fane, slowly, like he wanted them to understand the sincerity in the time between his words. You're not defective, he said. You're just different than what people expected. That doesn't make you less valuable. It just makes their expectations stupid. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. A little girl with pigtails and a gap where her front teeth should have been burst into the room, like a small storm. Behind her, a smaller boy clutched a stuffed dinosaur, peeking shyly from behind its head. Emma stopped short when she saw the sisters. Her eyes went round. "Oh," she breathed. "You're green, Emma," Marcus said gently. Manners. But Kessa felt something unexpected. A laugh. Bright and startled, trying to escape her chest. It had been so long since anything had been simple. She knelt to Emma's level. "We are green," she said softly. "My name is Kessa. These are my sisters Mira and Fane." Jacob peeked around Marcus's leg, hugging the dinosaur closer. "Are you gonna live here? If that's okay with you," Fane said, her voice small but steady. Emma's face split into a grin so wide it looked like it might crack. "That is so cool. None of my friends have green people living at their house." Marcus let out a laugh that sounded rusty, like a door that hadn't been opened into long. "Kids," he said, "why don't you show them your rooms? They'll need to know where things are." Emma grabbed Mira's hand without hesitation. Jacob reached for Fane's fingers, still half hidden behind his dinosaur. They chattered as they climbed the stairs about toys and school, and a dead goldfish named Mr. Bubbles, and how Emma once tried to feed macaroni to a plant because she thought it looked hungry. Kessa lingered at the bottom step, watching her sisters disappear into the upstairs hallway with two fearless children. She turned to Marcus. "Why did you really do this?" she asked quietly. "People don't spend money without wanting something back." Marcus stared at the worn carpet for a long moment, as if the answer lived there. "Because everyone deserves a chance to matter," he said at last. The system failed you. It failed me to different ways. He lifted his gaze to meet hers. Maybe together we can fail a little less. That night, after dinner and dishes and bedtime routines, the house finally softened into quiet. The three sisters lay in a room that was small but clean, with real windows that looked out at real stars instead of projected ones. Mira sat on the edge of the bed, turning her wrist under the lamplight, watching the red stripe cut through her barcode like a curse. "It's not what I expected," she murmured. "Nothing ever is," Fane replied, curled beneath a thin blanket. Kessa touched the ink on her own wrist, the mark that had defined her worth for so long. She remembered the premium wing, the way attendants smiled like salespeople. She remembered the cold corner of the unusables corridor. She remembered the auctioneer's bored voice. And she remembered Marcus standing at the back of the room, looking like someone who didn't belong anywhere, raising his bid anyway. "Maybe that's not a bad thing," Kessa said. Downstairs, they could hear Marcus moving around the kitchen, packing lunches for the next day. The sound was ordinary, human, domestic. It felt unfamiliar in a way that made Kessa's throat ache. Through the thin walls, Emma's sleepy voice drifted from her bedroom. "Dad." "Yeah." "Sweetie?" "I like them," Emma whispered. "They smell like cinnamon, and they told us stories about flying ships." "I'm glad," Marcus said, his voice softened by exhaustion and love. "Now sleep." A pause. "Dad, are they gonna leave like Mom did?" Silence stretched, heavy and tender. Then Marcus spoke, and the quiet promise in his voice made Kessa's eyes sting. "No, baby," he said. "They're going to stay for a while. I promise." Kessa lay back, staring up at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. She felt something she hadn't felt since the test results had come back. Not relief, not safety, not yet. Hope. They had been labeled sterile, worthless, defective, put up for sale like broken merchandise. But in this home, no one had looked at their wrists. Two small children had grabbed their hands without fear or calculation. A tired man had spoken to them like people instead of property. And in the space between one day and the next, between a renewal center pod and a bedroom with real stars outside the window, something inside Kessa began to loosen like a knot finally undone. Tomorrow, they would wake up in a home instead of a holding cell. They would make breakfast for children who didn't care about barcodes or red stripes. They would learn the rhythms of this small, messy, stubborn life. They would patch holes, mend routines, tell stories, and listen to new ones. They would build something maybe not perfect, maybe not easy but real, and maybe, just maybe, they would discover that sterility had never been their defining characteristic at all. Not here, not anymore.